Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. We are continuing our reading of Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince and Other Writings. We are in chapter 8, and the title of this section is On Those Who Became Princes Through Crimes. One benefit of reading this is that you see through the lens of another time period, of another human. You can see some wisdom in what he's saying, and understand some nuances of politics. And when people bring him up, but they never read him, maybe don't take their opinion of him lightly. They got a sort of Hollywood boogeyman type of image in their head, but it's not really based on the book's its actual self. Sure, someone can be acting Machiavellian, but when you ask them to define what that means from the text themselves, they usually can't do it. So my goal here is to read it along with you, give you some of my insights on it, and then when people bring it up, you can give a more educated response and hopefully enlighten them on things that are true and not true. Go ahead and listen to this as you ride your bike, tend to your garden, clean your fish tank, you name it. But because there are also two other ways of becoming a prince from being a private citizen, which cannot be attributed entirely either to fortune or to ability or virtue. Okay, so here, before he listed, you can become a prince by fortune or by ability and virtue. Remember in the last section, he went into that deeply, where you need to have the opportunity, but also the will to do it. You need to have the finesse, the grit to actually lead, okay, and hold that territory. It does not seem to me that I should leave them out, although I will discuss one of them more fully when I consider republics. These are when one ascends to princely rule by some wicked and nefarious means. Okay, so usually usurping someone, you have a coup, you just literally execute the king, or when a private citizen becomes the prince of his native country by the favor of his fellow citizens. And in speaking of the first method, I will give two examples, one ancient, the other modern, without otherwise entering into the merits of this method, because I judge them to be sufficient for anyone forced to imitate them. Okay, so for anyone forced to imitate them. So either you came by a wicked, nefarious means, or you were appointed by your fellows. Agathocles, the Sicilian, not only from a private life, but from a low and abject position, became king of Syracuse. Cool, we got another one here. His name is spelled Agathocles. The son of a potter. Oh, look at that. How cool. He led a wicked life through all the stages of his career. Oh, snap. Nevertheless, he coupled with his wickedness such vigor of virtue of man. Oh my goodness. So here, look. He's the son of a potter. He became king of Syracuse, but he was apparently a very wicked man through all the stages. Wow. But Niccolo notes he had the vigor, the virtue to get the job done and embody that. After joining the army, he rose through its ranks to become military governor of Syracuse. Once established in this position, and having decided to become prince, and to hold through violence, and without any obligation to others, that which had been granted to him by consent, common consent. So look, that's intense. So to hold through violence. So really having a sort of iron grip, iron fist on his authority. He reached an understanding about his plan with Hamilcar the Carthaginian. Oh wow. So Hamilcar the Carthaginian, who was with his armies waging war in Sicily. One morning he called together the people in the Senate of Syracuse, as if things concerning the state to deliberate about. And at a prearranged signal, oh boy, doesn't sound good, he had all the senators and the richest people killed by his soldiers. Oh, dang. Okay. So history is amazing. And some of the good scenes in movies that we like come from history. We just don't know it. When Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones has the red keep and she has the wildfire underneath, and a lot of the nobles and the High Sparrow's minions and himself are inside, takes them out. This is very similar. And when Khaleesi is with her dragon and with Dario, and this is the first time she rides her dragon, the Sons of the Harpy, when their golden masks, are inside the arena, and they attempt to take out everyone and to really make a scene. So this type of situation happening in history and in reality shows you what humans will do to maintain power. That is why it's so foolish to say conspiracies aren't true. Because in order for him to carry this out, he said a prearranged signal. He had to do logistics. They were conspiring to lure all these senators and carry this out. And probably somebody overheard some plans, talking to the people. Hey, did you know this could happen? Did you know this could happen? There was probably some, ancient liberal there. How dare you have a conspiracy theorist? How dare y'all? But here, if you notice, he's using this sort of wicked aim to fulfill his cause and what he thinks needs to be done. Today, people pretend like politicians don't conspire to outone each other, even when we have way more money now and huge armies. It's intense. Literally intense. Wow. I mean, the richest people and all the senators, so the whole aristocracy, okay? Because when you take out the money class and you take out the political class, that's a huge blow. And then you know that the people who survived, they're going to want to maintain what they have. They survived. They're usually going to obey the person who, did that. You can tell when an authoritarian leader flexes that hard. You're like, whoa, all right, we're going to back off here. Similar to when Kim Jong-un executed his uncle, right? It's like he's willing to take out his own family. You better be careful. After their murder, he seized the city and ruled over it as prince without any civil dissension. See that? Exactly. So, wow. So he wanted to become prince, son of a potter. His name is difficult. Agathocles. Sounds almost Greek, his name. It's, really close to Greece, so might as well. In Macedonia, right? Because it's in the south. Wow, he had the virtue, the vigor virtue. They don't mean like the Christian sense of virtue. They mean like wrath, the testosterone energy to get it done. And he did it. Wow. And so his plan was plotted with Hamilcar the Carthaginian, and they carried it out. Imagine that would be, I would be very curious if you could time travel, right? And see how that went down. Obviously, I'd want to be in a cloud safe, no one could hurt me, but how did that look like? Must have been pretty intense. History is brutal. And although he was defeated twice by the Carthaginians and ultimately besieged, not only was he able to defend his city, but leaving part of his troops to defend against the siege, he attacked Africa with others. In a short time, he liberated Syracuse from the siege and placed Carthage in dire straits, so that they were obliged to come to terms with him and to be content with the possession of Africa while leaving Sicily to him. Wow. Intense. So, he got defeated twice by the Carthaginians. They sieged him up, but in the end, he was able to liberate Syracuse and get back his territory. So not only did he have the intelligence to take out all the senators and the rich, but he also was able to defeat the Carthaginian soldiers in their attempts to siege his area twice. Kind of shows you how leadership was back then. It's intense. Today, very similar. But when you talk about corruption, people will call everything a conspiracy. Yet, this kind of shows you that to plot, to plan, to lay out these sort of stratagems is to conspire. And they theorize about how to get their objective done. It's quite intense. Whoever examines, therefore, the actions and ability of virtue of this man will not see anything or very little that can be attributed to fortune. In that, as was said above, it was not with the favor of any person. Aha! Not with the favor of any person. So it's not like some noble, like a George Soros clown, funded his whole operation. Rather, he had the grit and grind by force, by a crime, to get it done. But by rising through the ranks of the army. So this is another interesting part. He rose through the ranks, so he had potential. So each military person saw him and was like, there's something in you and you should be appointed. So from the son of a potter, to rise through the ranks of the military, to team up with Hamilcar, and then to give a signal, murk everybody, right? Whew. It's just intense. Defend his territory twice. You can see how it's like, wow, what a life. Pretty intense. Which he had achieved with 1,000 hardships and dangers, quite clearly. That he ascended to the princely rule, and afterward maintained it by many courageous and perilous efforts. So here you notice he's getting at, you have to maintain your territory with perilous efforts and courage. You have to be willing to suffer hardships and dangers. Today you have more feminine men who are in their laptops, they're cozy, they get offended at comedians, they love censorship on Twitter, they can't handle someone saying there's a difference between men and women. The liberal class of America is very, very frail and not willing to suffer. So I think America now is going to go through a cleansing process where we're going to see what it's like to suffer again, and our fat poor people will no longer be fat but thin. And we're going to have a big tough time here. And when you look at how this leader was, right? Agathocles, look what he did to maintain power, and then compare that to Biden, who can't chew pizza with the soldiers, doesn't have the respect of the soldiers, who is mocked and hated, yet this censorship doesn't allow the world to see it. He's unloved, unrespected, and YouTube took away the dislike button to protect the White House because people can see clearly he's unfit, right? So compare a leader like that to this kind of leader, and it doesn't mean that Biden should behave in this way, but rather it means how low civilization has become decadent to the point where they no longer care about who's in power, and the people themselves don't care about who's behind him really pulling the strings. So it is quite interesting when you look in the history of men, of powerful men, and see how they maintained their land, how they struggled and strived, how the world was shaped. You see it's built by strong men, and that weak men will always be conquered. So if you want peace in your land and you want stability and fortune, you must not have a weak leader. It's really interesting, because here he's pointing out that you have to have a leader who's willing to go through all that, right? It really shows you quite a lot. Still, it cannot be called virtue to kill one's fellow citizens, to betray one's friends, to be without loyalty, without mercy, without religion. By such methods, one can acquire power, but not glory. So here, what is he getting at? So, glory is achieved by having an honor code. And that honor code has to have an element of mercy, has to have loyalty, and a duty to your own citizens, and a loyalty to your friends, and a religious emphasis. Now, that's interesting, because for Machiavelli to include religion, it shows you that it has to be kind of something ordained by God and something that is on a spiritual nature that might help the troops, right? So these angles we have here can really make you see that there is a lot of wisdom in what he's saying here. Wow. So you'll get your power, but if you break all the codes of conduct in terms of what is the virtuous way to conduct war, even though it's bloody, brutal, smelly, a horror show, but if you don't do those things, you can't get the glory. And some people do go to war because they also want to conquer and win, and they want the glory of winning, right? No one wants to be on the losing side. For if the ability virtue of Agathocles displayed when encountering and escaping from perils, and his greatness of spirit and supporting and overcoming adversities are considered, there is no reason why he should be judged inferior to any of the most excellent captains. Nevertheless, his ferocious cruelty and inhumanity. So here, he's contending, if he's judged by captains in the military, they will see he's not inferior, but rather he was ferociously cruel and inhumane, and he committed countless crimes. So, because of this, you can't celebrate him as being an excellent man. You see the difference? So, he's really noted here that if you become a prince through crime, you do have the strength, you do have the ability, right? But you have committed some things without mercy, harmed your own citizen, betrayed your friends, but you didn't get the glory, but you are not inferior by most military measures, but you can't be counted among the excellent, because to be excellent you need glory, and to have the glory you have to have certain codes of warfare, right, to win by certain means. Abject cruelty is more of a horror show villain than a glorious noble conqueror who took by might and took by right, but did it in a way that can be admired at. Because usually we don't admire the overly cruel, the bold, the courageous, and have to get it done, but not the pettily cruel. One cannot therefore attribute to fortune or ability that which he achieved without one or the other. Look at that. So here, it is quite interesting how he laid it out for us. Hamilcar the Carthaginian, Agathocles the Sicilian, became king of Syracuse. Quite intense. Quite intense. I don't know if people want to imitate him, but you can just see how maps were made. And I must say, learning about this guy, you can see how certain people who got into power got there, and it wasn't just because of bloodlines. Hope you learned something.